Good afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video. This is an interview about some books that I wrote, and my interviewer, Alyssa Bobbitt, my neighbor and friend. Thank you so much. And so today's date is September 21st, 2019. We just recently had September 11th, and I just wanted to acknowledge that date, the importance of that date, and express my sympathies for those that are still mourning, and also my gratitude and my admiration for those that served on that day, and also the families and the friends and the communities that came together on that day and represented the best of what America stands for. Thank you so much for that. So today's interview is primarily about two books that I wrote there, Forbidden Fruit, Volume 1, Volume 2, which is sort of a parable, which we'll talk about. And since I have another book that came before that, A Bit Worn, it used Becoming JAPOC, which is about the journey that I went through to kind of get to where I am at this point in my life. But today's focus is going to be about the two books there, Forbidden Fruit. So with that, I'd like to turn over to my friend Alyssa to ask me some questions about the book, and it'll give you a better understanding of what the book is about.
Appreciate it. I read the book. I enjoyed it very much. I'm getting into the second book now, and just wanted to thank you for sharing it with me, and for you and Angie being such great neighbors. So when you introduce the book, you say it's a parable. Can you explain that?
Right. So
what are the messages?
So at the 30,000 foot level, what you see in the book is the conflicts that the characters go through, but primarily the main character, Akilo, finds himself in an interracial relationship. And although that's not the point of the message, it's an easy conflict for people to understand. And so I use that as a way to highlight the challenge that Akilo deals with, both in dealing with the limitations of society at that time. The setting is in the 1990s. And so he's the type of person that believes he can make things bend to his will. So the part of the parable is our decision to influence or impose our will on the world around us. And then at some point we recognize where there's limitations, or there's larger things at play, and how much do I concede to the larger plan versus impose my own will. And so in like fashion, when we're talking about our spiritual relationship with God, there's always that challenge between the free will that we were given versus God's divine will. And so it's always a thing that we have to practice, discerning between our will and God's will, and when do we pull back and when do we push forward.
Why did you choose racial conflict as the primary conflict in this story?
Well, it sort of fell into place as I was writing. It was something that I just, I've been through it myself. Mm-hmm. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to, whether you've experienced it from the inside, or you've seen it happen with your friends, with your family, or you pay attention to that kind of thing on the news. It's something that I thought was easy for people to grasp, and it was something that I experienced personally, so I could use that as a lever in a sense to get my point across.
Do you think Akilo is advanced? Do you think he's relatable?
I think that some people will have a difficult time relating to the resources that he has available to him, both in the sense of the financial resources that he has personally available to him through his parents, but also the experience that his parents and his family provide for him. I'm going to talk a little bit about this in the second book, but more in the first book, but more in the second book, where his father and his uncles are really builders of different specialties, and he takes a lot of that experience and uses it for his own endeavors. And so he's been prepared to do financial investing. He's been prepared with entrepreneurial endeavors. He's been prepared to put his hands and fix things himself. So he's been really given a head start on life in that sense. And so some people haven't been given that, but I think that a lot of people have. And so for me, it was something that I've had a little bit of experience with because my father's the kind of person that believes in doing things himself, and he's sort of entrepreneurial in his own right. But also, his family members, or his father, my grandfather built his own house. They're masonry. They're the kind of men that show up to a place and they talk about how to fix something or make something better. That's their pastime, is fixing things. And so I got to see a little bit of that myself. So in a sense, yes, it is advanced, but it's also something that I got to see. I just didn't take as much advantage of it as I probably should have when I was younger. So my character, Kilo, does.
There's a lot of symbolism used in the book. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I didn't really plan a lot of that. It just sort of fell together. So you've got the parable, which is the surface level conflict between Kilo and the world around him and the girl that he's dating. And then you also have the characters in Raheem, who's really important more in the second volume. Boomer, who's his moral guide, and then you've got, you'll see more and more of this with Tamala, where she imposes herself in the book as a source of wisdom. And so what I discovered that I was doing as I wrote the book is Raheem sort of represents the best potential for physical prowess that a Kilo could aspire to. Boomer represents the highest source of spiritual understanding that he should and wants to aspire to. So he respects that. And Tamala becomes this beacon of wisdom in his world that he also relates to, aspires to. And so all of these different things, these different symbols, these different embodiments of attributes are things that Kilo aspires to in different ways. And I think I see that in myself, where I have, at some points in my life, I have potential to become wise. At other points in my life, I have potential to become or to be athletically effective in some kind of, in my case, it was martial arts. But I also, I at times I can be very spiritual. I don't see myself as a preacher, but there are times where I feel like I have a connection to what God is saying to me. And so part of this book is about sharing that.
Speaking of that, I know you and your family are Christians. Do you feel this book is relatable and for people who perhaps are not Christians?
So I think I'm not writing the book from the standpoint of preaching. I'm using the day-to-day conflicts. I'm using everyday circumstance. I'm using disappointment and frustration. I'm using hopes and fears. But I'm also using a little bit of stoicism in the way that I write this book. That's this philosophy that just comes down to knowing who you are and being on your path and accepting your path wherever it takes you, while at the same time you continue to learn and grow and try to become the best of yourself. And so while, yes, there's a spiritual component to it, there's a Baptist influence in the book, but there's also this influence of, at the time I wasn't learning about Stoicism, I am now, but I sort of headed in that direction with my life. In the first book, you see where I'm evolving from this person who's just focused on little things to someone who's more focused on selflessness. So selfishness to selflessness. And in there, I try to become very practical in my approach to becoming a better me. And so a lot of the book has that influence. So I think that appeals to everyone, or at least it should appeal to everyone.
So is the book semi-autobiographical or is it fiction?
Yes, both. So The first chapter of the book is actually I'm pulling from an experience of my 1993, summer of 1993, where there was a girl I was dating, and some things about her past that she was trying to get away from. I found myself stumbling into, and I didn't really realize how close I could have come to getting myself way in over my head, and who knows what would have gone wrong there. I also this whole building thing and fixing things. I was exposed to that, and though I didn't do nearly as much as the Kilo actually does, it is something that I wanted to share in the book. And so relationships that I've been a part of, or things that I've seen, friends, experiences, I use a lot of that in the book, as well as my own aspirations, things that I wish I had done, things that I wish I had done differently. So I use both, imagination. I use things that are an embellishment, and I also use some things that actually happen.
So does the title of the book have anything to do with the Kilo and Bridget's relationship?
It does, absolutely. I changed the title several times, and I finally landed on Forbidden Fruit because that gave me an opportunity to play against the parable. And so that's the central surface level challenge that I use. And it's not a political statement for me to say that I don't believe that you should have interracial relationships. I'm just taking advantage of the reality that we have in society where we still don't really truly accept that type of relationship. And so, in the sense of them wanting to have this kind of relationship and running into resistance both from both cultures, as well as their friends internally at first I don't have any issue with you guys doing this, but it's a bad idea, right? That kind of a thing. And so I am taking advantage of a known challenge that we have in our society to help me make a surface level point and illustration while I tie that down into the undercurrent of the story, which is, we have our will, and then God has his will, and then we have to decide when, how much us, how much him.
So which character are you, the Kilo or Boomer?
I'm both at times. Most of my life, I say I'm more Kilo, although, he's a better athlete than I was. He's got more resources than I really ever had. But there are times where, especially when I taught Sunday school for like 5 years, I was really pretty connected, and there were times where I was able to meditate and feel like I was, I won't say hearing God, but feeling like I understood what I was supposed to be doing. And there have been times where I've had some fairly supernatural experiences. I don't want to go off into Twilight Zone with that, but there have been times in my life where I felt really, really connected to what I was supposed to be doing. In fact, last year, I knew that God was asking me, what do I want to do with my life? And without thinking, I spoke from the heart. I said, I want to write for you. And so the challenge for me has then been, okay, am I going to stay true to this self-proclaimed identity that I have? And what's my path? And walking my path it's a two-part question, right? What's my path? And am I going to walk that path? And every day I think, we all have a challenge that we have to deal with, and how much are we going to commit to staying true to our own identity, our own authenticity, and this journey that we believe that we're on, are we going to stay on that journey?
Who is Tamala's character based upon?
Tamala, I don't want to give too much away, but Tamala is essentially the at this point in the Kilo's life, Tamala is his highest potential for wisdom. And so he recognizes that she has a way of seeing things that kind of cuts right to the chase. What is a pure matter of the fact of the situation. And Kilo is that way as well, but in this relationship that he's going through, he's losing his sense of discipline, his sense of logic that you do see as in his character is important to him. And so he's giving away some of that, he's giving up on that ideology that he needs to live his life by a certain strategy and a certain approach for the sake of love. And so Tamil is challenging him that, this is, I don't know you that well, but I know you enough to know that this isn't who you are, and you need to check yourself. And so that spirit of wisdom that he wishes that he had, wishes that he was aspiring to, but he resents it at this point in the story in volume 1. I think that's where I wanted to use her for the character development and that next set of conflicts that he has to face in order to decide who he's going to be.
So are you attempting to make a political statement with the conflicts that you've identified in the book?
I'm not trying to make any political statements, but I am using some of the political challenges that we have, especially around race relations. But there's also, how do you deal with violence? There's some bullies in the story that Akilo has to face. Financial matters, this sense of materialism, and that we pursue achieving things so much and with so much focus that we readily sacrifice who we are and our understanding of morality and our sense of integrity. We leave those things aside for the sake of achieving things and reaching milestones that I suspect, because from my own perspective, my own life, you lose the value of achieving this milestone when you're always focused on the next goal, the next thing to attain. And so you miss the beauty, you miss the relevance, you miss all of the lessons and all the things that you had to do and give up on, the strengths that you gained, the new information, the knowledge and relationships that you developed on your way to achieving that next goal. And so I'm just using some of the political challenges that we face, that we deal with, in order to add some conflict to the story, to add to the depth of the dialogue, and also to show Akilo's path from this person who's focused on just achieving things to someone who wants to eventually evolve into where there's meaning in what he's doing. And I think that's why he admires Boomer so much, because Boomer knows what he wants to do and why he wants to do it. And so Akilo embraces Boomer in that sense, that I can at least help you to achieve something that's meaningful, because I don't really have anything meaningful in my life other than achieving a bunch of goals.
So talk to us about volume 2. Why should someone continue reading and go on to this next book?
Great question. So a lot of things are resolved in volume 2. I also amp up the conflict a lot in volume 2, and volume 2 was even more an adventure to write than volume 1 was, because by the time I get into volume 2, the characters are fairly well defined. I know what they want, I know what they don't want. I've got my scribblings, I've got my pictures of them around me. I have a sense of what I think they look like. And their characters in my mind, they have backstories. I don't show all of that in the book, but each of these characters has become very richly defined in my mind. And so by the time we get into volume 2, we can really, I was able to just allow them to speak. And when I just needed to put a situation into the text and have the characters surround that, and they just kind of spoke. And so I think volume 2 was even more evolved, even more naturally than volume 1 did, because I didn't have to force so much. I just let the characters speak. I just basically set the table and they went at it. It was fun.
I look forward to reading it. Hopefully we can do this again.
I think we should. And thank you so much for all the time that you spent in this interview with me, and thank you for the help, thank you for the resources, and thank you so much for your friendship to me and to my family.
Oh, it's been a lot of fun, and I value the friendship as well. Thank you.